Welcome to our Knowledge 3, our third unit, talking about the ancient Greek civilizations. And today we're going to continue talking about Athens. We now learned how Athens got its name and why they picked that place to live there. Now we're going to talk about some important contributions of Athens, and actually we're going to talk about three different components from our civilizations. And today's read aloud is titled Athens, the Birthplace of Democracy. Before we get into Athens, let's go over our vocabulary words from this unit. Again, I will read the words, you will repeat it after me. Independent, summoned, mission, grand, Spartan, ideal. When we look at our words here, which one of these words means doing it on your own? So when we talk about the city-states, they're all on their own. Which one of these words is doing something without really help from others? Yeah, that would be that word independent. What would be the word then if you had a special task to do? Remember, that would be the word mission. So remember, we're talking about these five components as we go through our Greek civilizations. Today, like I said, we're going to be talking about three of them. So as you listen, we're going to actually have our first leader, and we're talking about city-state leader. Actually, technically, we're talking about four of these. But get ready to hear about these components some more, especially in Athens. Remember, we're in Athens, and Athens is located right here on our map. This is the big, what the ancient Greeks, where they were living. And right here would be Athens, and that we're talking about. Remember, the city-state of Athens got its name because they decided to choose Athena's gift, and they decided to choose the olive tree as their gift from her. And so they dedicated it to her and named the city Athens. Let's think about this question before we start our read aloud. How does the United States pick a new president? Well, this year that I'm recording this, it is 2020, and this is a big year because in November, if you're listening to this in November, then this is the month that we vote to pick a new president. So the people get together and they vote for who they want to run. It's not somebody doesn't choose for us, it's the people that get to choose. So that's how the United States picks a new president. After today's reading, you should be able to explain the origins of democracy and demonstrate understanding of the word democracy. So again, I'll quickly give you a definition of democracy just so you have that in the back of your mind as we go through this. So democracy is like a way of governing or ruling, and it gives power to the people to choose their leaders. So when we ask this question, who has the power? Who's the one picking the president? It's the people. So that means it's a democracy. So I hope you enjoy hearing about how democracy got started and how it's still being used today, even in the United States. So as you listen to today's read aloud, make sure you listen to hear more about the city-state of Athens and about a very important contribution that it gave to the world. Again, we're going to hear a new leader as well today, so listen for him. Hero and Dion were on their way to Dion's home, passing through the central marketplace of Athens, where people spent as much time conversing or talking as they did shopping. The two young men stopped to buy some olives at a farmer's booth that stood beneath the branches of two old olive trees. As they stepped out into the sunlight again, Dion turned to look up at the top of the high hill. Really, Hero? Dion asked. Is there a more beautiful spectacle anymore than the Parthenon? So the Parthenon was a temple dedicated to the goddess Athena. My father and I traveled to many wonderful places on our trading voyage around the Mediterranean, but I never saw anything equal to it. Hero agreed as he looked up at the magnificent temple. Just as the city-state of Sparta focused on self-discipline and training for battle, the Athenians focused on their love of art, beautiful architecture, and sculpture. So architecture is the style in which buildings are designed. The Athenians filled their remarkable city-states with graceful buildings that were pleasing to the eye. Inside these buildings and in the public spaces around them, famous artists created statues for all to enjoy, statues that even today are considered some of the finest ever made. The Athenians were wealthy enough to cover a 40-foot high statue of Athena in gold before setting it in the Parthenon. The ancient Greeks showed their devotion to Athena by visiting her statue and offering her prayers and gifts. So, why would the Athenians here want to put a statue of Athena in this beautiful building or the Parthenon? You can kind of see the drawing of it back here. Why would they do that? Remember, they decided to pick her, so they're going to honor her, and to honor someone, they would build a big statue. So I know after this read aloud, to honor me as your teacher, you're going to build me a big statue, aren't you? At the same time that the arts were the glory of Athens, Athenian scientists were making discoveries that would become the basis for modern science. For example, one scientist you will learn about was a great observer whose ideas and classifications, or he broke things into groups, are still used today. Other ancient Greeks contributed inventions that the next civilizations developed more fully, including the gear, screw, watermill, and catapult, plumbing, using furnaces to melt and shape iron, and using air, water, or steam for central heating. Athenian merchants such as Dion and his father were trading as far west as present-day Britain and as far east as present-day India. These merchants brought back goods and even more knowledge from distant lands. This is another way Athens differed or were different from Sparta. As you heard earlier, Sparta was a closed society, meaning that most of the people were not allowed to travel outside of the city or trade or explore. At the heart of all these remarkable achievements was the Athenian belief that human beings could achieve almost anything they set their minds to, and in whatever they could not achieve, they could at least fail with grand grace. So if grace means a polite or nice way of behaving, what do you think failing with grand grace means? Well, one of our classroom rules is, you know what, never giving up, and it's okay to make mistakes. And that's the way they were living. They would try new things, and if they made a mistake, that's okay. They wouldn't make it a big deal. They'd just learn from those mistakes and move right along instead of making it a big problem, which is awesome. It was this belief in the benefit or good of independent thinking or thinking for oneself that led to the greatest of all Athenian gifts to the world, greater than the art, the architecture, or the Olympic Games. This gift was the gift of democracy. Remember, democracy was the way of governing or ruling. It gave the people the power to choose their leaders and to help create their own lives. So it wasn't a government of kings, but it was a government of people. As Hero and Dion continued walking on that sunny afternoon so long ago, they glanced ahead and saw a face they knew well. "It's Pericles!" Hero exclaimed. All Athenians knew the man whom they had elected or chosen to run their government year after year. Pericles held great power, both as an army general and as the leader of their government. However, Like all Athenian leaders, he had to be re-elected or chosen again to his office every year. And if the Athenians did not like the job he was doing, they could vote him out of office or right out of Athens for up to 10 years. And when I was studying this, Pericles at one point did get voted out of Athens for 10 years, which is crazy. It had not always been this way. In the past, Athens had been ruled by a king. So under the rule of a king, are the people allowed to help create the laws or choose them? No, the king is the one. Which city-state did we learn about that had two kings? Yeah, that was Sparta. Then several nobles started to rule in place of the kings. Finally, a new leader came along who thought every citizen should be able to take part in his government. Originally, only men who were born in Athens and who were considered wealthy or rich enough were allowed to be citizens. And these citizens had the right to vote, to be part of a jury that made decisions in a court of law, and to serve in the assembly, a large group of men who debated or kind of talked about and created laws. Over time, even poor men and some merchants who were not born in Athens but who lived and traded there were allowed to take part in this assembly. However, that turned into to be a lot of people, over 5,000 participating in this assembly, and it became too difficult to manage the meetings and allow everyone to have their say. So that would be like if I decided to have all the second graders be in my classroom. That would be a lot, and it would be hard to manage, and they decided to do something different. The Athenians decided to have some citizens from each area come to the assembly to represent the people from their area so that the group could be smaller and easier to manage. Every citizen still had the right to choose who would represent them in the smaller assembly. Women, however, did not have the rights to do any of these things. Although they could own land and have their own money, Athenian girls also did not have the right to attend school as the boys did. For Athenian women, it was more important that they learn to cook, sew, and clean. However, all well-educated young ladies learned at least enough mathematics at home to be in charge of a household budget. And some who had learned reading and writing at home were widely admired for their intelligence and learning. Most Athenians knew that the best woman friend of Pericles, leader of the Athenians, wrote many of his famous speeches for him. Yet she was not permitted to listen to him speak those words in the assembly, nor to vote for the laws he suggested. So in the United States today, are women allowed to vote and take part in creating the laws? Yeah. I want to tell you this though, they were not always like that. It was not always like that. So that law came to be just recently. Seeing Pericles up ahead now, Diane asked Hero, "Who are those two men with him?" Hero peered above the heads of others in the crowd. "Oh, only one of the greatest writers in the world and the artist who designed the statue of Athena," Hero answered. He smiled. "Only in Athens could you witness a conversation among the greatest living political leader, a world-famous writer, and such a celebrated artist. Don't you wonder what those great men are talking about?" "Whatever it is," Diane responded, "I'm sure it is the most fascinating or interesting conversation." So at the beginning of the read aloud, Hero and Diane were walking around and they saw the Parthenon, this very beautiful building. And inside that building was this big golden statue of Athena. Why did the people of Athens choose a statue of Athena to put in this beautiful building, the Parthenon? What, according to the read aloud, is the greatest contribution of ancient Athens? Yeah, remember that was democracy. Who was the leader of the democracy whom Dion and Hero saw? And how did he become the leader? You remember his name was Pericles, and he became the leader because the people voted him as the leader. So let's compare the two city-states we've learned. How are Athens and Sparta similar, and how are they different? And this last question is your opinion. Which city-state would you have preferred to live in? Athens or Sparta? Why? So we heard this word, and we're talking about this word today because it's a big contribution that is still used in our government today, which is crazy. So I will read the word. You repeat the word after me. Democracy. What two sounds is the letter C making in this word? Democracy. Oh, it's making a k and a s. It's making both. It's soft and hard sound. What do you think the word democracy means? Remember, democracy is a way of governing or ruling which gives the people the power to choose their leaders and to help create their own laws. I love this. So it says your vote counts. It's a little pin. And that's one big thing about a democracy is that everybody gets to vote and to pick their leaders that they want. The United States is a democracy because its citizens have a say in the way things are done in their government. Do you think a democracy is a fair way to run the country? Why or why not? I definitely think it is a fair way because not one person is making a decision, but it's the people helping make the decision. So, this is a big one. We're talking about our civilization charts. We're filling this chart in day by day, and tomorrow we will have a bigger chart now, and I'll show you guys that tomorrow on our screen. But today we talked about 3 different components. We already talked about Athens as a city-state, so it's not that one. So we have 3. The first component we talked about in this read aloud was a religion, and it was actually the Parthenon, because the Parthenon was part of the religion because they were honoring Athena by putting her statue inside the Parthenon. So this is actually a picture of the Parthenon today. It doesn't look as grand now, but because over the years it has crumbled and stuff because it's very, very, very old. But look how much is still standing, and it's pretty amazing stuff. So again, a religion that we're adding to our chart is the Parthenon. Okay, next on our chart, we're going to add a leader. And remember, that leader was Pericles. He was one of the people that spoke up about starting a democracy, and he's an important leader in that. He was one of the leaders that the people voted in, which is amazing. So right now we've talked about religion. We've talked about our leaders. Anyone know what the last thing we have to talk about? That's right, we have to talk about our contributions. And that contribution would be democracy and the Lincoln Memorial. What does the Lincoln Memorial look like? If I go back to this picture, there's the Parthenon, there's the Lincoln Memorial. So the Lincoln Memorial was actually, they built it because they liked the way the Parthenon looked. So this is in Washington, D.C. right now, and it's holding a statue of Abraham Lincoln in it. And then another contribution would be democracy, where we get to vote and the people it's a government of the people, not just of one person. So what I want you to do today is I want you to use one complete sentence. I want you to tell me the importance of democracy. Why is democracy so important? So for me, what I would say about democracy being important is because it's a government that's not just by one person saying it, but it's by the people. The people get to run the government. I hope you enjoyed learning about Athens. Right now, as we've talked about ancient Greeks, it seems like it's almost an ideal or perfect society, but they did have some problems, and we're going to talk about one of their enemies in our next read aloud.